presenter today is RIT alumnus and social strategist Erin Thompson. Erin is founder and managing partner of Sprout Hive, a social media development agency. Prior to starting his business, Erin was the social strategist for Brand Networks, Inc., a social marketing and software development company based in Boston. While at Brand Networks, Erin was able to work with several Fortune 500 companies and their online strategies. Before that, Erin led the social media marketing efforts for Wegmans Food Markets, Inc. Erin is recognized for his sense of humor, savvy marketing skills for technology and the web, and his tiny smart car. Erin is also a proud member of the U.S. Navy and continues to serve the reserves. When not applying his social media savvy to business purposes, you will find Erin and his wife, Jenny, also a social media strategist and an RIT graduate herself, around Rochester checking out the latest great eatery, enjoying fab festivals, or working on their house. Of course, with smartphones in hand, sharing it all on multiple social networks. And with that, take it away, Erin.
Thank you very much, Talia. So yes, my name is Erin Thompson, and today the name of the presentation is Social Media Isn't an Island. One of the things I love to try and describe things with analogies. I think, at least for myself, it helps to explain some obscure concepts in something that's tangible. So with the title of this, what I'm talking about when I say social media isn't an island, I think a good example of that is all about how the company is set up and how you set up your social program. Social media is no longer an element or a channel that should just be, individualized and not brought into the marketing mix. An example of that is when I was at my time at Wegmans, when we stood up the social media program, one of the things we looked for was collaboration with the business units, showing them the value in social media, as well as collaboration with our consumer affairs or PR team, also showing them how it could alleviate some of their call volume and email volume by the usage of social media. So with that, that's where the name of the presentation came from. Just thinking about social media not as an individualized channel, but more of an integrated part of your marketing mix. So the agenda for today, first of all, I'm going to introduce myself, talk a little bit about why it is that they've asked me to come and speak to you all today. Then we're going to talk about your business. Who are you talking to? What do you want to do with social media? How do you want to incorporate social media? And when should you get started with social media? And hopefully by the end of this, we will have gone through it and established why social media shouldn't be an individualized channel or an island in your marketing department. So, talk a little bit about myself. My name, as I said, is Erin Thompson. I am the founder and managing partner of Sprout Hive. We're a social development agency developing social strategies as well as software and any online medium. Prior to that, I was a social strategist at Brand Networks, working with some great companies there. Brand Networks is a strategic marketing partner of Facebook. And then for those of you that went to RIT, I'm sure you're very familiar with Wegmans Food Markets. Definitely some great midnight snacks there. And I led the social media team there as well. So that's where my background comes from. Where to find me if you have any questions after this. Of course, you can contact the folks here at RIT, but you can also find me on Facebook, on Twitter, LinkedIn, or email me at aaron@sprouthive.com. So with that, let's get into it. So first of all, who are you talking to? With this, a lot of times in social media, you hear the term fish where the fish are. And I just wanted to kind of dive into that and talk about what it really means to fish where the fish are. I think it's a nice, quippy saying, but sometimes I think everybody has their own interpretation of that. So with the fish analogy, I'd like to bring up one of my favorites, which is the Goldfish Effect. One of the things I've seen, especially like at my time with brand networks, we worked with a large retailer, and they had an excellent program to drive customers in store. The issue with the program was that it wasn't integrated on .com, wasn't integrated with any of their other social programs, and even the folks in operations in their brick and mortar stores had little idea of what it meant. So in essence, what happens is every time someone would meet that customer, it was as if they were meeting them for the first time. And in social media especially, social media is all about relationships. So once you do that handshake and you say, hey, I want to follow you, or I want to be a fan of your page, or I'm giving you some part of myself and a look at what I do, and putting that out there for you. And then, as a company, we come back to the customer and say, hi, how you doing? I'm company X. When they've already made that established relationship, it kind of feels, a little distancing. So the Goldfish Effect, there's a myth that goldfish have a memory of 3 seconds. So every time they come around the fishbowl, it's like they have a new experience. In essence, that's how I kind of make that analogy to this, is a lot of companies will have that same experience with their customers, to where when they visit any channel, it's almost like they have that same memory lapse, in that they forget about who that customer was when they just spoke to them on another channel and reintroduce themselves, thus alienating the customer, and not really taking full advantage of that relationship that is there for the company and customer to really exploit and find some great ROI for the company. So with the fish where the fish are, the first step is knowing who you're fishing for. So in the example of the Goldfish Effect, why does it happen? Companies stand up social programs that are disconnected. Like I said, they reintroduce themselves to customers each time. Then the customer, when that experience is so different and on a new channel, they have to find the new way to speak. They have to find the new rules of the channel, and they have to reintroduce themselves. I think one of the ways that we found when I was at Wegmans was that everyone was on the same team. Social media was under the marketing team. So this also deals a lot with the company infrastructure and how different business units are aligned. In the case of Wegmans, they definitely aligned themselves well in that social media and marketing and the business units were all very aligned in the same focus. And many of the larger companies that I've worked with find that the companies have different incentives, and so they definitely have disparate messaging and disparate channels going on that aren't always connected. And so that's how this type of effect happens, is that the incentives aren't in place to bring those all under one roof. And the teams, it really goes into teams working together to do what's best for the customer and finally for the company. So look at your own pond first is the next point. Again, to get rid of this effect and to really figure out what it is that your customers are looking for from you, the first thing you have to do, going with the fishing analogy, is pick a good spot. Do some sleuthing to find out where conversations are happening, even if it's on your own website. Many websites today that are out there, especially any e-commerce websites, have reviews, and that's a great place to start. Looking at your customer reviews, customers are going to look to peers many times over the recommendations of the company itself. So it's important to pay attention to that. That in and of itself is a form of social media. A lot of times we don't think of it that way, but it's a community that's built on your website. One of the things we did when I was at Wegmans was we looked at, when we were looking to get into social media, what it was where the conversations were already happening with our customers. And also we looked at barrier to entry. From that, what we discovered was that Twitter was actually going to be the best place for us to dip our toe in the water for social media and start the relationship with customers. Prior to that, as I said, company buy-in is especially important in standing up any social media program. So we needed to prove the case, and as I said, Twitter was a low barrier to entry. We were able to get in, show that people wanted to talk to Wegmans, showed that the conversations that were being had were critical, and we also showed that we were able to help customers in the meantime. So it was a great way to prove that case and allowed, while I was at Wegmans, to explore other avenues of social media and build out the program there. So next is pick the right bait. Do what makes sense for your business. In some cases, Facebook isn't going to make sense for your business, and that's okay. What matters is that you pick a channel that you can sustain, you pick a channel that makes sense for your business and your customers, and that you pick a channel that you have some knowledge around, so that you can, when you join the channel and start the conversation, that you don't alienate your customers by just being the new guy. And granted, they will have some flexibility. Anytime there's a new kid on the block in any of the social channels, a lot of times, the people that are there are just happy to see you there, especially if you're a brand you love and when you're bringing value to them. So finally, when looking at your own pond, the biggest thing in fishing is bringing that fish in. So reel them in. When possible, connect your site to where customers are already interacting and socializing. Today, more than ever, it's relatively easy to connect an online website to social media. And that way, that connection, that when customers introduce themselves to you on a social site, you can then carry that over to your website where you're driving that ROI and driving those sales or leads, and really prove a case of how that relationship can help your business. Next, what do you want to do? I want to talk a little bit about how you can match social media's unique abilities with unique value propositions to customers. So, as I said, there's definitely no loss of social media channels. I think the biggest thing with figuring out what you want to do is to ensure that your programs lead customers with one message, and they use each channel's unique capabilities. In some cases, it doesn't make sense to necessarily drive a campaign on a channel. And it also doesn't make sense to use a channel only because it's there and you have an account. One of the projects I worked on with Brand Networks was with a hotel chain. And the way that they were able to figure out what they wanted to do and also drive unique value for the customer was by taking the customer's social profile and attaching that to their hotel chain's profile. And then by that, they were able to see, okay, now I'm already in a community. Let's just bring my friends to the party, and let's figure out, by that, the company was then able to make more intelligent recommendations to the customers, and they were able to share that with friends. So it's a good example of how unique value can be driven from social media, but it takes a little bit of planning, and it takes some work to connect those data elements to make sense for the customer so that it's not confusing and that they can definitely see the value in that. So, and if you're only going to be doing campaign-based, before you do any campaigns, there's two questions that I always recommend asking yourself is, why, if I were the person, why would I want to share with my friends? And then from a company's perspective, what is it that you want customers to share? So at the end of the day, what is that message that you want them to share with your friends? You have the unique ability with social media to guide a lot of that, and with that, you can make sure that when those stories are going out to the friends' networks, that they're continuous with what you want to see as a company going out as a marketing message. Next, we come to the fun part. How do you incorporate social media? I think I could go on for hours, and unfortunately we only have an hour, but one of the examples I wanted to bring up in this discussion was how to incorporate social media with customer service and with CRM, or customer relationship management. So this is just an example. The cartoon on the right is an example of the Goldfish Effect. Someone calling themselves a customer says they want something called service. Here's an ideal situation where customers come in, they've already introduced themselves to the company, and now they need help with something. In this instance, company has no idea who they are because they haven't done the planning or the data analysis to connect the customer profile with their social media profile. And there's definitely software out there that can do this for you, but it's also just being committed to your customer base and taking on what you can to really drive that value home for your customers. One of the things we did when I was at Wegmans was, as I said, Twitter was one of the first elements that we kind of broke into in social media. And what we looked at for the purpose of that was to use it as a customer service tool and also to use it with CRM. And how we did that was, again, aligning with internal business units, getting buy-in from our consumer affairs department. We were able to establish a way for customers to, no matter where they were at any of the 80 stores that Wegmans had at the time, they could tweet a question, even if it was, hey, I'm trying to find hamburger helper, what aisle is it in? This isn't my normal store. And the consumer affairs specialist was able to then quickly get that answer back to the customer and utilize the immediacy of the channel to get that customer service turned around. And then how did that tie in with CRM? The way that tied in with CRM is consumer affairs already had a CRM system in place. And so as we were planning out our endeavor into social media, we made sure that we were aligned with them and trained the team up on how this could then integrate with the consumer database so that when any of these calls came in, it was logged and it was reported back as to how much time was spent on it, what the result was, and that way there was definitely visibility from all members of the foundation, the store that could see, okay, we know that this is what's happening on Twitter today. The other great thing was we were able to take that database output and share it throughout the company. Again, showing how call volume had dropped, the amount of messaging had actually increased, but there was a shift from email to Twitter, and so the time it took was also lessened a little bit. So there was some training curve on the front end, but for customers, customers definitely appreciated the quick turnaround and the ability to really talk to an individual. That was something that, playing on the strengths of what you do when you come into social media is important. I think Wegmans did a great job of that. They're definitely known for their customer service, and so going out with that foot forward was important to them, and they definitely put everything behind it, and we were able to pull off a great program for them, which they still use today. So again, use the unique power of social media to serve your customers' needs, where they are and when they need it. Again, as I gave the hotel example, being able to integrate something that they can do anywhere. Hotels are not unique as far as travel agencies today. Anybody can go on to a slew of different travel websites and figure out what it is, where they want to go. In this case, we were able to say, this is why you should go here. Your friends are talking about it. You already have a relationship with us. So let's embark on that, and let's give you that value there. Second, get internal buy-in. Focus your team around the program. As I said, this depends a lot on how your company is set up in your infrastructure, but definitely aligning to that one vision of what it is that you want your customers to do, what it is that you want your social media program to do for the business will help alleviate that goldfish effect and help alleviate the confusion internally as well, and get you that buy-in from the integral people that you have in your company. Third, align resources to serve customer needs. as I gave with the Wegmans example, not only did we take it on, I was in the marketing department, but we partnered with the public relations or consumer affairs department to get that job done. If we would have done it only in the marketing department, we would have alienated the consumer affairs department. So again, incentives would have been different, and we wouldn't have been able to track it in their CRM system. So alignment of resources is definitely key. The other part with that is you also want to find folks when bringing them into your social program that are going to be passionate about social media, know the business, know your brand. I think that's one of the things that I've seen with a lot of companies is they get the transient individual that maybe an intern that has a lot of passion for social media, but they might not have the brand wherewithal, or they might not have the business savvy yet in their pocket to really dive in and do a great job. So not that they can't be a part of the team, but as far as them leading the team, I would say, let them get their beak wet a little bit before you have them fill that leadership role. Also, make sure that they're going to be there for, you're planning out for a relationship with customers that's not just going to be for today. So you have to plan for longevity. And finally, report back results in order to continue to build out the program further and find correlations. I think this is the most important part. Reporting in social media or with any online media is critical. And fortunately for online media, it's something that can be done relatively easily. And unlike print media or display media, other display media, it's easy to see consumption. It's easier to see consumption and what individuals are being reached, even down to the geographic regions. You can also see demographic data. Reporting that back to constituents within your company is key, and that it lets them know that you're hitting your mark, you're hitting the individuals that you want to be speaking to, and you can also show how it aligns to your key customer segments. This also gives you the ability to show where the objectives that you laid out at the beginning of your program now are being met, or there's room for improvement in your social media program. Keeping an eye on reporting at all times is key to that. Finally, when should you start your social media program? I can't say it enough. Start today. Even if it's, and what I mean by start today, this doesn't mean that you have to go with a full rollout of a social media program. If you're not familiar with social media, that's okay. But get in there. It's free to start a Facebook page, free to start a Twitter account, and you can get in there and at least get familiar with the conversations that are happening out there, the conversations and the way that people are speaking on these networks and what they're looking for as far as a value add. One of the things we did at Wegmans was that, a lot of the folks, especially at the executive level, were admittedly, they weren't on social media, and they realized that they didn't fully understand. So what we did to help them out is we actually went in there and set them up with accounts. We walked them through. We told them, we gave them, what I called a boot camp on what social media was and how people spoke. And it proved to be very effective in helping them understand something. With Twitter as an example, it looks like a foreign language. It looks like hieroglyphics when an outsider looks at that. So to be able to get them comfortable so that you're speaking the same language definitely leads into a better way to find buy-in. So the first thing you want to do is roadmap what makes sense for your customers today and where they are now. Don't focus on what it is that you want to do 2 years from now, because God knows that a lot of the social channels that are here today probably won't be here tomorrow. So establish your next steps for 30, 60, and 90 days out. Have milestones within there that you want to meet. So set your objectives up, look at that reporting, and see where you're measuring up to your goals and objectives that you've set out at the beginning of your program. And don't think that you have to start out with every social channel that's out there. It can be overwhelming, and your customers will realize that in the content that you're delivering to them. Pick one that you're familiar with, that you feel comfortable with, and drive your message home on there. Really build out your relationships with your customers on that particular channel. Next, plan your resources accordingly. Make sure it's sustainable for your roadmap. Again, as I said with the example of the intern, not a sustainable plan. Look for those folks in your company that can afford to dedicate some time to social media, can dedicate time to figuring out who the key players are in your network, and report that back to the agency. In the case of Wegmans, one of the things that we found was there were definitely key individuals that we knew about that would be speaking about the company the most, that would be going into our stores frequently, and we could track that back to the business. So when they spoke, we knew that we needed to listen to them, and that that they were somebody that really had their finger on the pulse within the social media networks as well as in our stores. And they were looked to as authorities within those particular channels. So addressing their needs and what they were saying to other customers was key in the success of the program. So finally, a tip for when should you start. Like I said before, don't just join the channel only for campaigns. Join it for a relationship. With any of social media, it's all about building those relationships. At the end of the day, it's really just what you do in your day-to-day business, and that's speaking with customers. Social media is just another channel to have that conversation. Today we're having the conversation via the phone and over the web with this webinar. Social media is just that. You're just having a conversation with your customers that you would see every day. So you wouldn't just cut them out after you sold them something. You definitely want to embark on that lifetime value of the customer and drive that relationship home. It's rewarding for yourself and rewarding for the customer, and that you're providing value to each other. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to everyone here at RIT for letting me speak today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to help. Contact me with any questions. There's my contact info, aaron@sprouthive.com. You can also contact RIT, #me RIT webinars. And with that, I think we'll open it up to questions.
Yes, well, thank you, Aaron. I will never be lost in a Wegmans again. We have a bunch of questions that came through, so we'll start. The first one is from Corey. Speaking of our pond, we are a manufacturer using Facebook, Twitter, Google+, mainly for name recognition and education. We have many friends and followers that I would consider non-customers or prospects. They don't seem to be a bother by posting or sharing improper information, but should we actively remove or block them?
That's a great question, Corey. My point is, or my perspective is that they're not a customer today, but you never know when they will be a customer. So if they aren't causing a problem, if they aren't being a troll within the community, and driving negativity and going against what your norms are for your social channel, I would recommend not removing them. Again, they might not be a customer, but they may have friends who are customers, and they may be a customer of yours tomorrow. So my recommendation would be no, don't remove them.
All right. The next one comes in from Deborah. Aaron, have your social media efforts converted directly to leads sales, or is it just a way to keep your company visible and current? I am on the major 3 social marketing sites, and there's more time finding good content to post versus the output in terms of sales. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and Deborah, this is all about how you integrate social media into your business. Dependent on what your objectives are for being in the social space, will really determine whether or not you've set up your program to drive sales and ROI. There definitely are ways to do that. As I said, one of the straightforward ways is to integrate with your .com site. So integrate those relationships with the way that customers can log in and then you can establish that relationship. They can go through, purchase, and then share out their experience with their friends. Not knowing completely what your business is, I'd be happy to speak with you offline. But yeah, like I said, I think it's really about developing those goals and objectives up front. But yeah, I think there are ways to take those conversations that are happening online and pulling them into sales, depending on how it is that you run your business. If that's to an in-store event that you're looking to pull customers into, there's ways that you can put out incentives in the ways of coupons, in the ways of promotion codes, and then make those specific to your social media program, so that then when they come into your storefront or .com site, if you have online procurement, then you can see where those customers came from and tie those directly back to your social media efforts.
Great. The next question comes from Martha. Aaron, can you speak a little bit about applying these strategies to self-employed individuals? How does that change things?
Well, Martha, that's a good question, and I think in that case, congratulations, first of all, on having your own company. But secondly, I think it actually size really doesn't matter in this case. I think in the case of being a company owner and an army of one, it actually makes for an advantage in that you don't have to worry about buy-in. Normally, that's the critical piece in any social media program, is getting that buy-in and aligning those resources to the objectives that you're setting out to do in your social media strategy. But in this case, you make the decision. So I think any of these, no matter if you're, like I said, one of the Fortune 500 companies I work for, or if you're an individual business owner, a small business owner, I think they'll serve you well. I think the key is pacing yourself and making sure that the social networks that you're on, like I said, not trying to be on everyone, trying to be everything to everyone, but finding where those key areas are that your customers are, and what's going to do the best for your business.
Great. The next question comes in from Sasha. Sasha wants to know, what are the possible dangers to embarking on the social media strategy, especially for a small operation?
Dangers. That's actually, well, fortunately, you are behind a computer, so that'll save you. But all kidding aside, no, that's actually a really good question, Sasha. I think that it's a common question that we see in social media, is the fear that you are no longer driving the conversation, that you're just a part of the conversation. And what I would normally put it back to the individual that asked that question is, there's actually more of a danger of not being in that conversation, because without knowing what's going on in those different channels, you have no way to drive any influence and answer questions that might be going on that are simply happening because there's no one actively pursuing that community and taking part in that community. I think there's been several instances where there's folks that I can give an example for Wegmans. We had an individual that he was actually an employee. He was a disgruntled employee, and started going out on several social channels and berating the company about their discouraging employee policies and how they were unfair to employees. And if we hadn't been there, we wouldn't have known that conversation would have gone on. And in that case, I think you actually risk more danger, because that's what the traditional media likes to pick up on, are conversations like that. And in that case, we were actually able to get an offline conversation with the individual. I spoke to him personally and was able to connect them with the right people in HR. And actually, what happened from that conversation was that, yes, the individual did have some concerns, fortunately for the company, they weren't, it was a misunderstanding on his part, and we were able to set him straight and get him connected with the right people to get him the answers that he needed. At the end of the day, even though it was the individual, the case was is that he had been let go from the company, and at the end of the day, we were able to say, hey, this is why it happened. Once he got that information he was looking for, he was fine with it, and we didn't hear anything else from it. So I think that's the danger question is one that I get a lot. That it is the scariest place to be. But you set up your rules for your community with any space. You can set up that no personal attacks. One of the things that we always say is play nice. Don't say anything. Set up your standards for your communities that you expect to see, and that's how you can circumvent some of that danger in that, tell individuals this is the expectations of being in this channel. If you don't like it, we will, in that case, we will either ignore that comment or block that comment, depending on what channel you're on. So I hope that helps you out, Sasha. So
negative comments and tweets
negative comments
present an opportunity for service recovery.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
Exactly. Otherwise, they're just left out there to fester if you're not there. And this gives you a way to connect with the customers. They're already, you can already tell they're upset. Most that I've seen online, they're normally not happy, and online channels definitely present the means to be anonymous. So people feel a little freer to say things that are on their mind. But that's also good because it gives you an unbiased look and really a gut check of how you're doing as customer service agents. And you're able to address it at the key. Some people aren't always going to be happy. And, as a company, as a firm, you have to be comfortable with that there's that 90-10 rule or 20-80 rule that there's going to be customers that aren't going to be happy any of the time, but normally that's the lesser of the populace.
The next question we have comes in from Diana. Diana wants to know, how did you determine who your key conversation leaders are on social media?
Key conversation leaders. So key conversation leaders, I think, fortunately, like I said, with any online medium, you can see, you can measure based on, whether it's their profile. You can look and just do, the old ocular test and see where the majority of conversation is coming from. You can also look at respondents to certain individuals. Are there key people in your communities and your social channels that when they say something really drives conversation with other customers and really gets that thread going inside that channel? Those are the folks that I would look at as drivers within the communities. And then if you're able to also tie those individuals back to sales, then you can put in business rules to also look at, of the percentage of, they may speak a lot and drive a lot of conversation, but they might not be driving your business. So if you are able to tie their social profiles back to your business, you can also put that in as a business rule to weight those a little higher.
Okay, great. We have a follow-up question from Corey. So Corey says, we are launching a new website this fall and want to use social media to highlight specific new features. Do links embedded in posts and tweets really work? I rarely use them myself.
Yes, they do. Two ways they work. One, it gives customers the ability to share them out. So, traditionally, in traditional media, email media was one that shares out a lot of links, and it's definitely a one-to-one engagement that you can do. Links in social media, tweets and posts, the great thing about them is, one, they're trackable. So you can see that individual is clicking through. You can see who it is, where they're clicking through from, and what happens after that. You can also tie that back to the social media channel. Second, with most social media today, at least Facebook and Twitter. You can also, if it's really important to your business, you can also put media dollars behind that and boost those messages. So in that sense, you increase your reach and you get that message out in front of customers that may or may not have seen it previously. But the key to any of the links in posts, tweets, whatever it is, whatever type of channel you're going after, is the content has got to be key. It's got to be engaging, and it's got to be something that really grabs somebody. So just putting a link in there, necessarily won't do it. But if there's the value there for the customer, and you can clearly state that in whatever manner it is you're posting that in, that's what's going to get them to click through.
All right, then we have another question from Nathan. Nathan wants to know, how does he show ROI using social media?
So, how do we show ROI? So again, Nathan, this is something that is definitely driven by your objectives that you set up front. So there's different ways to show ROI. I often compare social media to traditional media. When you look at a traditional media campaign, you look at how many people it reached, how many people took action after that. So aligning your social media plan with your other marketing efforts is imperative so that you can see the impact that it has on it and that you're able to track when that social media message went out and what it did for your business. Tying it directly to ROI really depends on, like I said, what your objectives are, but also how you've integrated social media. Are you doing something in B2B? Is there a white paper that somebody can download? Is there a webinar that they can go to based on what you're doing? And then you can take those figures and use those as leads for your B2B business. In B2C business, is there some easy ways to do it? Are coupon codes, specific links that lead into your website that are only used on social media that you can then track back to those social media campaigns and say, look, this is where these people are coming from in social media. I think the key is that, don't expect everything to go viral overnight. It takes time, but prove the case out, get the buy-in from the individuals within the company, and show them where that reach is going and what it's doing for the business. At the very least, even if it's not driving sales, you're driving awareness within the social networks.
All right, we have time for one more question. This is a big one. This comes from Ella. Ella wants to know, what is the next big thing for social media?
Ella.
I know. Always start in trouble, those ones.
The next big thing. Honestly, I think the social media channels, they will continue to evolve. I think that really the next big thing will be the continuation of integration of social channels into traditional online medium, being that, connecting your site with your social media profiles, having that social media profile be your ID, so that, I don't know about you, but I know I have logins for everything under the sun. I try and keep them, although any security person would probably hate me, I try and keep them the same. Very easy to guess, so don't try and hack me, please. But with that, I think it also causes me strife as a customer. And so what I see, as a real opportunity in the next step is that continuation of integration with online, to really drive those recommendations that are going to be key to the individual, no longer to, just a subset of a demographic, but really down to the individual need that you can do once you integrate social profiles with e-commerce. You can then find out what it is that person likes, where it is they like to hang out. You can find things out about their family, and once you've established that relationship, they're more comfortable sharing that with you, to where, I think that's really the next big thing for social media is further integration with the traditional marketing stack. I don't think, I think with any of the social channels that we've seen come out and really do well. Lately Pinterest and Instagram are huge. Vine has come out there and really started to do some cool stuff. But again, I think how you drive them back to the business, the name of my company is Sprout Hive. The reason that is with any business, traditionally you're a hive. You're just a series of customers. You're providing a common good. And so, with that, a lot of times for companies, that's your website. And so establishing your hive or your social community around that is critical. And I think that's really where the next step in social media is going to go.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for question and answer. Any additional questions can be emailed to ritalum@rit.edu or tweeted to us with the hashtag #MeRITWebinars, or contacting Aaron directly from his information on the screen. And if we get the questions, we'll direct them right to Aaron for him to get back to you. Note that all participants will receive an email from us in the next few days with a link to today's webinar's recording. Thank you, Aaron Thompson, for being our distinguished presenter today. We hope you enjoyed hearing from today's presenter as much as we did. And most of all, a big thank you to all our RIT alumni on the webinar today for joining us. We thank you for taking time out of your busy workday to be with us. Please consider joining us in September when the MeRIT webinar series kicks off the fall semester with a new area of focus, one that's sure to be of great interest to all alumni of RIT. Watch for an email later this summer inviting you to join in. Thanks again for joining us. Thanks again, Aaron. Please exit this webinar by going to File, Leave Event. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.